All right, welcome to the Industrial Music Channel. Back for our bi-weekly here, and today we're counting down, ranking our favorite of the 1970s decade. One of the favorite bands for both of us, and it was nice to go back through this catalog here. So, thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe to the channel, comment, let us know how you rank the 6 studio albums of Rush in the 70s. Welcome to any comments that you have. Remember, these are our favorites, not necessarily ranked by what we would consider the best or what critics may say is the best. This is Incredible Luddite, or the Incorrigible Luddite, and myself, favorite, ranked 6 to number 1 in the 70s. Stay tuned for the end. We've got an exciting announcement about our show coming up here in 2 weeks on September 11th. Have a big football fan join us here for the start of the NFL season that day. So stay tuned till the end. How about kicking us off with your number 6 Rush album of the 70s?
This one's pretty easy, Jimmy Duster. For the Incorrigible Luddite, his number 6, probably my least favorite Rush album of all time. I'm very familiar with Rush's catalog from the debut all the way up to and including Counterparts in 1994. That's 20 years of Rush. So I'm pretty acclimated to their catalog. And I enjoy it for the most part, but one record I do not care for at all is the debut from 1974. Not a fan of this record. John Rutsey is the drummer here, not Neil Peart, of course. This sounds like... it sounds more like Rush being a bar band. And there really isn't one song on this record I really care for. It's very blues-oriented. It sounds kind of like, has a Led Zeppelin feel to it. Sabbath light. Like Working Man to me is like a Sabbath light kind of a song. Heavy Cream, however you want to phrase it. In the Mood is just a song I just really don't like at all. When we mix things like Rush and girls and beer, it just doesn't work for me. The only song on this whole record that I remotely like is probably Before and After, that's a decent song, but everything else on this record just falls woefully short for me. Too bluesy, too straightforward, too raw. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10.
Okay. Well, let me start with my number 6 and just say that when it comes to the Rush albums, I don't think that there's a bad album. My top 3, depending upon the type of mood I wake up in or the type of mood I'm in, could be interchangeable. Actually, my top 4 could probably be interchangeable. To me, all these records are a solid, at least an 8 out of 10 for me. All these records, and their whole catalog is that way for me. But my number 6 is the same one of the few that I have, the debut album. And yes, I mean, I agree with you. Definitely the more of the hard rock sound and the progressive rock that followed. Definitely a Led Zeppelin Cream on there.
Not a hint of Prague on there.
Yeah, there's not really. And I think a lot of that came with Neil Peart, and we'll get into that with some of my future ones here. I could have almost ranked these chronologically and come up with my top 6 of the decade from beginning to end. But my number 6 is the debut. I do like In the Mood. I like that song. I like Working Man. Finding My Way. I really like that song on there. I do like this album, but it is my number 6 album of the 70s.
Well, I want to mention something about Rush. Other than this record, there's something about every single record that they've released between 1975 on Fly By Night and 1994 on Counterparts You know, that's a lot of records, and there's something that I find on every record that I really love. Even Presto, which is probably my second least favorite. Of course, that's the last record of the '80s. But this is the one that I've never really liked this record, and it dates back to when I was younger, even in high school. I just never really connected with it. It doesn't sound like Rush to me. So.
Yeah. Yep. Well, back to you for number 5.
Number 5, and now all these records are at least good from here on out. Every single one of them. There's something to like or love on all of these records, but some of them are definitely stronger than others. My number 5 is actually going to be Caress of Steel from 1970. I believe it's 1975. I think it was released the same year as Fly By Night, but later in the year. This record it's kind of a transitional record for Rush. There's some interesting moments on here. It's a little clunky compared to what follows, and it's not quite as memorable as what came before it. You know, some of the songs on this record have their moments, like The Fountain of Lamneth has some really interesting moments on it, but compared to the epics that are going to follow, it just doesn't have the musicianship, nor does it have the charm of the earlier epic from the previous record. It's a good song. The Necromancer, it's kind of like practice for the next record, as far as I'm concerned. It's a very heavy track. It's definitely Necromancer is one of the heaviest tracks in Rush's catalog. So if you want your Rush heavy, the Necromancer is definitely a song to hear. But some of the robot noises in the song that would be used so effectively on the next record, on the story side, don't really work on the Necromancer. The story's kind of convoluted. Bytor is back from the previous record. And both these songs, the Necromancer and Fountain of Lamneth, have their moments, but I don't think either one is tremendous. They're both good. The best song on the record is probably Bastille Day, which it's more of a straightforward song. A bit of a Led Zeppelin influence on this song, but it doesn't really sound like Led Zeppelin. It sounds like Rush. It's an interesting song about the French Revolution, Bastille Day, Robespierre, whoever the king was of France at that time. A very interesting historical piece. I enjoy that song a lot. Lakeside Park, I'm really not a fan of. Never really liked that one too much. I don't hate it. I think it's kind of mediocre. So I think there's 2 really good songs on here. The epics, not great, but good. They point in the direction of what's to follow. So they're very important tracks. Clunky compared to the epics that are going to follow later. And Bastille Day, the strongest song on the record. I'm going to give this record a 7 out of 10. It's an interesting listen, but it's not a classic record. I give Caress of Steel 7 out of 10. I will say the Necromancer is probably one of the 3 or 4 heaviest songs in their catalog. So there you go.
All right, thanks. My number 5, I went with also 1975, but the other album from 1975, Fly By Night. The first album featuring Mr. Here, right here behind me. And sort of a Wally Pip way into getting into, in my opinion, maybe the greatest rock band ever. With John Rutsey with his diabetes having to leave the band. And I was just reading here that Neil was the 4th guy that they auditioned, and he was playing in a local band called J.R. Flood at the time, and they played along to the song Anthem and thought that was a good fit for him, and obviously it was. But Fly By Night is just starting to scratch the surface of Neil's lyric writing. Still a lot of the lyrics written by Getty. I don't think Alex wrote any on this, but I think he obviously contributed to the music. And I think you're hearing on the Fly By Night album, you hear more of the hard rock sound with just sort of a slight transition to prog.
I would agree with that.
Of it with Bytor and the Snow Dog. Anthem. I think Anthem is a great song on that album. Probably my favorite on the album. And the title track, Fly By Night, is a classic. The one song I don't care for too much on this album is Rivendell.
Oh, I can't stand that one. I'm with you on that.
And that's the only thing that sort of kept this one number 5 on my list and not up to number 4. So my number 5 is Fly By Night.
Okay. Interestingly enough, my number 4 is Fly By Night.
Okay.
But overall I do like it more than Crest of Steel simply because the songs are more memorable. Now, I think Anthem is okay. I'm not huge on that song. A little straightforward still, but vastly better musicianship in the first record. I hate the song Rivendell. I can't stand it. I'm with you on that. I just call it the Hobbit song, or it's Tolkien influenced, right? And that's not Rush's strength. And it's just too, I don't know. They're going for something baroque, and it just doesn't really work on that song. The Rivendell is the only song on the record, other than the title track. I don't like the title track either. It's kind of a power pop song, really, when it comes down to it. It's not really even a hard rock song. I'm talking about Fly By Night. It's probably along with Rivendell, one of the 2 songs in the record that wouldn't even be qualified as a hard rock song. Fly By Night's very much a power pop track. To my ears, it's just kind of straightforward, and I guess I don't hate it, but those are the 2 worst songs in the record, Rivendell and Fly By Night. Anthem is okay, not huge on it. Definitely my 3 favorite tracks on the record, without any question. My favorite is By Torn the Snow Dog. It is, let's just call it Primal Prague, all right? They have their chops, but I wouldn't say they're consolidated yet. But they wrote this really charming song, which, it's got some time changes in it. It's got some different sections. It's not as complex as What Is to Follow, but it's so playful, so charismatic. It was about a dog that wandered into the studio. It's an interesting song. I like Alex's guitar work on this song a lot. It's my favorite song on the record. Probably one of my 20 favorite Rush songs of all time. There's something really charming about this song. I've always loved By Torn the Snow Dog. I also really like Beneath, Between, and Behind. That's my second favorite song on the record.
That is a good song.
Yeah, it's got some really interesting guitar parts. The song's kind of progressive, kind of. Just there's some interesting changes on the guitar in the song. I think it's a lot more progressive sounding than, say, Anthem, for example. And I don't know what it's about, but I really like the song a lot. And the one that came back to me that I really started to like more, my 3rd favorite song on the record, is definitely In the End, which I think is the last song on the record.
Yeah, it is.
I really like Alex Lifeson's guitar tones on this track. And interestingly enough, and this is just one of those interesting coincidences, Jim, it's a song on the David Bowie album, Young Americans, from the same year, a whole different kind of song. It's not a hard rock song. It's kind of an R&B rock kind of hybrid song. That song is called Win, W-I-N. It's actually my favorite song on Young Americans. Some of the guitar parts are eerily similar in these 2 tracks. I mean, it is uncanny. It's just one of those happy coincidences. David Bowie and Rush were not influenced by one another. Both legendary acts, both incredible acts. Just one of those happy coincidences. If you listen to Win, then listen to In the End. Some similar guitar motifs in those songs by Alex Lifeson, and I don't know if it's Carlos Alomar or Earl Slick on Win, but I really do like In the End. I love Alex's guitar bit on that song. That's my 3rd favorite song on the record. Overall, this is still much more of a hard rock record than a prog record, but I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Enjoyable listen.
Good. Where are we at? Number 4? Well, my number 4 is the one that you just mentioned, Caress of Steel, for your number 5. And to me, this is probably the most underrated album in their catalog, and maybe the most overlooked. To me, this is their big transition album. It's where they started to throw in a lot more prog elements. And with Neil, you know what you get. You got in the groove. You get, in my opinion, you get a bit of overplaying from time to time, but you know what you get every album. Geddy, you know what you get every album, a fantastic bass player, and, you know, his vocals, you either love them or hate them. You know, I think I heard Rush music about 15 times before I realized that they had a male lead singer. And, so you know what you get with them. And the wild card in the band to me has always been Alex. And I don't think Alex gets enough credit for just the different textures that he's been able to create. It's almost like a watercolor, a pad of watercolor paper, and he just has free reign to do whatever he wants. And to me, Caress of Steel is the album that he begins to show that on. I think the debut and Fly By Night, while his playing was fantastic on both of those, it was still a little bit of that, you know, Cream, Led Zeppelin, power chord based.
I would say the Who too, for sure.
Yeah, and the Who.
You definitely hear. Well, I'll get on to the influence of that being on Rush when I get to my next one. But
there are 4,000 other bands that you know were playing at the time, playing hard rock music. But this was where Alex started to get away from the power chords a little bit, throw in some textures here and there, some arpeggios, some single note playing, some fantastic solos on this album, like with all their albums. The songs that stand out to me are Bastille Day,
great
Fountain
song,
of Lamneth, and the Necromancer. The two long ones on that I really liked. And Lakeside Park, I think you said you didn't care for that. I
really care for that
Lakeside Park. Not quite sure what it's about. I'm sure I've read it somewhere, probably some park in Toronto or something.
I think it was about Neil growing up a park he liked to frequent, I think.
Okay. But yeah, for me, it's their most underrated album and the one that finally transitioned them into prog, and could easily be, again, depending upon my mood, could easily be number 3, 2, or even probably number 1 on my list when I go to listen to Rush, the albums. If I want to listen to something from 70s Rush, the album that I would pull out. So from here on out, they're kind of almost all interchangeable for me. So let's go back to you for your number 3 pick.
Yeah, real quick, I want to get back to Crest of Steel just for a second. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think those epics, the Necromancer and the Fountain of Lamneth, they're definitely pointing in the direction to my number 3, and they're almost practice for what they're going to do on the first side of my number 3. And that, of course, is 2112. That's going to be my number 3. Now, a lot of people would have this at number 1. A lot of people might have this as the greatest Rush record of all time. And I think, according to rating services and whatnot, this is their second highest rated record. I think it's a very good record, but I do think it's a bit overrated. The story side is every bit as great as advertised. I love the story side, the waterfalls, the story, kind of the futuristic sci-fi feel to it. I love the opening on Temple of Searings. That was one of the first Rush songs I ever heard. It is fantastic and every bit as great as it's cracked up to be. There's great time changes on the story side. There's great musicianship on the story side. There's delicate passages on the story side. It can rock hard. It's an interesting story. It's the first thing that they did that is really progressive. I mean, really progressive. Where, as on the Fountain of Lamneth and the Necromancer, they're really trying to be progressive. It's just a little clunky. This is absolutely cohesive to a startling degree, and it works so well, and it never really gets old. The story side is an 11 out of 10. I love it. I especially love Oracle the Dream. That's my very favorite part, and that's near the end. It's so very emotional. A lot of people don't equate Rush with being an emotional band, but Oracle the Dream, that little 3-4 minute segment near the end of the story, is just really, really emotional. And I actually like Geddy's vocals on that bit a lot. So yeah, the story side is incredible. However, the other side does little, if nothing, for me. As a matter of fact, I'm not a fan of Something for Nothing. I'm not a fan of Lessons. I'm not a fan of Passage to Bangkok, which is about apparently it's about marijuana, Jim. So whatever, no one really equates Rush with being, a marijuana band, but I guess that's what the song's about, right? I don't really care for any of those three songs. Probably the better moments on the other side are the mellower songs. I'm talking about the Twilight Zone and Tears. Tears has some Mellotron on it. That's interesting. Don't love Geddy's vocals on Tears. I really like the music on Tears, but not that keen on his vocals on that track. I don't think that kind of a song really fits Geddy's vocal style at any point in his career, but the music is great on Tears. Twilight Zone is an interesting song, inspired by the TV show the same name. Those two songs are good. The other three, the hard rock songs on the other side of the record, I can really do without. So overall, based upon the extraordinary story that is 2112 on one side of the record and the extraordinary musicianship of 2112 that is one side of the record, I would say 2112 is very influenced by Tommy. Going back and listening to it, even some of the guitar bits, you can hear how Alex was a bit influenced by Pete Townsend, I think. That's just something that I heard that I never heard before when I went back and listened to it, but that's fine. It's incredible, the story side, but the other side, yeah. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10, strictly on the strength and the grandeur of the story side. Number 3 for me, Rush 2112, 8.5 out of 10.
That's an interesting the comparison to Tommy. I hadn't thought about that, but as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, you can definitely hear that in there.
It's kind of the rollicking guitar bits. It's kind of like Tommy on steroids.
Yeah.
But then
yeah,
it really is.
Yeah.
I don't think the whole song is the whole story side is reminiscent of Tommy. It's not, but some of Alex's guitar parts kind of remind me of some of the things that Pete Townsend was doing on Tommy in bits of it. So
yeah,
that's a good thing. It wasn't, obviously it was totally Alex Lifeson, totally creative Rush, but I just hear how it was probably influenced a bit by Tommy.
And of course, that album, I'll get to that in a little bit, but that album was pre-MTV, pre-music video, but that is certainly an album, especially that first side, that you could see being portrayed on a big screen in rock opera type of format. So I hadn't thought about that. So good point on that.
Story side is as great as advertised, no doubt about it.
Yep. All right, now to my number 3, their last album from the 70s, 1978's Hemispheres. By this point, they'd grown into a full prog rock band. I think they were learning to play. They had learned to play as a trio. Starting with Caress of Steel. Of course, they've always been a trio, but to me, Caress of Steel, they started to develop the textures and some of the in-between stuff to fill in the space that you almost need to have when you're a power trio. And of course, in my opinion, these guys are the greatest power trio of all time. So
agree on that totally. They are.
Hemispheres to me is number 3. Again, it could be number 2, it could be number 4, it could be number 1, depending upon what I had for lunch that day. It's just one of those things. Cygnus X1 Book 2. Another sort of sci-fi-ish long song, and an epic song, and La Villa Strangiato, of course. The closer on the album, just another fantastic song on there. How long is La Villa Strangiato? Was a long song too.
It's about 10 or 11 minutes. It's incredible.
10 minutes.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And Cygnus X1, takes up all of Book 2, incidentally. Takes up all of side 1, the 18-minute epic there. So, they started to begin fully developing their epic. I could never hear the trees again and not miss it. It's a great song, but I don't know, the oaks and the elms and the maples all mad at each other. I don't.
I think that song. Well, I'll get to that when I get to the record, but it's a really interesting track. But I'll get to that one.
It is interesting. But it's one of those that I never have to hear it again. I do like the song though. It's just worn on me over time. And Circumstances, the other one on side two, and another great song. So yeah, top to bottom, the exception of Trees, I just think Hemispheres is a fantastic album. So back to you for your number two.
Okay, now we get into some stuff that I actually have. Okay, my number two is going to be A Farewell to Kings. See it?
Yeah.
From 1977. This was an easy number two. Almost a masterpiece, Jim. Almost a masterpiece. So close. You feel a certain way about the trees. Well, I feel that way about Closer to the Heart. That's a song I could care never to hear for again. It's the weakest song on the record. That and I'm really not that keen on Cinderella Man either. I really don't. I don't dislike that song. Yeah, Madrigal's all right. The other three songs are all incredible. Both epics. And A Farewell to Kings, the title track is also fantastic. For a long time growing up, when I was in high school, even though I think Signals, and we did a review on 1982 a couple weeks ago, if you guys would like to watch that, if you're watching this and enjoying this Rush episode, Signals is my favorite Rush record from 1982. But I think my favorite Rush song in the 80s was probably Xanadu. It was a real big deal for me to call up the local classic rock radio station, QFM 96, and request Xanadu. And
more on that later.
Yeah, it was a real big deal for me to hear myself, and I did it a couple times. I love this song. I still love this song. I love the kind of the nature feel to it. I don't love the way they look around this time, but God, the music is great. And Xanadu is just a terrific prog epic, kind of a hard rock prog synthesis, with bells and wind chimes and mysteries, and it's quite an extraordinary song. It's still a favorite of mine. Even better nowadays is Cygnus X1. This is probably the trippiest, spaciest song in the entire Rush catalog. It's very cosmic sounding. I love when those big power chords, heavy, ominous sounding power chords by Alex come in toward the end of the song. After the quiet passage, which, kind of the ethereal, spacey section, these big, heavy power chords come in and just kind of takes you somewhere else. Love Cygnus X1. Both of these songs for me are the twin epics on this record, are both an 11 out of 10. I really like A Farewell to Kings a lot as well. The rest of the songs, I'm not that high in Cinderella Man. Or I don't really care for Closer to the Heart, but overall, my ranking of this, based on the strength of the two epics, which are both incredible, and also the title track, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And I think it is a step up from 2112. Overall, I think it's a better record. 9 out of 10, Farewell to Kings.
Choice. My number two, the album that really, I believe, saved their career. Mercury was ready to drop them from the label, and their manager flew to Chicago and said, wait, just wait. Here's what they have in store for their next album. Of course, I'm talking about the one that you already mentioned, 2112. Come on. Kimonos, it's got to be at the top of a list anytime there's a picture of the band wearing kimonos on the back. Matter of fact, I'm going to get me a kimono so I can, when I do my gigs, I can wear a kimono. You got to love kimonos.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, to me, 2112, just a great album. It took everything off Caress of Steel, which apparently Mercury didn't like too much and was ready to drop them. Apparently, they don't like it near as much as what I do. But and Rush went to the epic 2112 with, of course, like you said, the story side, that first side, just incredible. You know, it's got the loud, it's got the quiet, it's got the soft, it's got the hard, just a little bit of everything in there. Very atmospheric.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rocks like nobody's business too. So it's just one of those songs that you can just put it on with headphones and put it on repeat, the full 20 minutes of that, and listen to it for 3 hours straight and just never get bored with it. Side 2, I do like A Passage to Bangkok. Twilight Zone, to me, is kind of take or leave. Lessons, Tears, and Something for Nothing, I think, are all great songs. That's my number 2, 2112.
Most people would agree with you, or probably even have it even higher. I mean, I think the consensus is by most people it's her second best album, but it's a great record. I just think it's a little overrated. My number 1, there's nothing else it could really be. It's pretty obvious for me. It's going to be Hemispheres. How do I explain it? This is your brain, and this is your brain on Prague, okay? And this character here would be representative, I believe, of Dionysius, Greek god of wine, revelry, intuition, nature, okay? I hope I got that right. I used to take mythology courses, but this would be Dionysius. This character here would be your logical guy. So what this, Neil Peart wrote this epic first side, and I'm going to state this right now, that the first side of this, Cygnus X1 Book 2, is my favorite Rush epic side. As great as 2112 is, I like the epic story side on this even more, okay? And that's saying a lot, because 2112 is incredible. But this is Rush at their absolute proggiest. This is more progressive than 2112, okay? And that's what we equate Rush with. And this is where they reach their absolute zenith in terms of the classic progressive rock sound. This is the album where they equaled the King Crimsons in the Genesis, the Gabriel, Steve Hackett era Genesis of the world. This is where they equal those bands in terms of dynamic musicianship. It was this record, okay? They couldn't take it any further, and they went in a different direction in the 80s. And for me, as we go into the 80s, that's where Rush really gets great, is in the 80s. But this, for me, is the best of their 70s material. I love all the time changes in the dynamic musicianship on the story side. Cygnus X1 Book 2 chronicles logic versus intuition. The story, I mean, it's Greek mythology based. To put it in layman's terms for you folks, it's just about right brain versus left brain and trying to find a balance. That's all it's about. And Neil wrote it in this really long-winded kind of a way, but it's quite charming. But you go there for the musicianship. Incredible progressive rock piece. This album is more progressive than it is hard rock. And this is the first album I would say in their catalog that I would say is more progressive than hard rock. The other side, La Villa Strangiato, what can we say about that song? It's an incredible piece of musicianship. One of their 2 best instrumentals, along with YYZ. A couple albums later, I'm not sure which one I like more. It's kind of a toss-up. They're both incredible. Circumstances, which is the most straightforward hard rock song on the record, but still quite progressive. There really isn't, everything on this record, all 4 songs are progressive sounding. Unlike A Farewell to Kings in 2112, this is where they really reach their prog zenith. Then The Trees, one of the most discussed songs in the history of rock music. What is it about? I think it can be interpreted in different ways. According to Neil Peart, it's just about trees. Was he lying to us? I don't know. Whatever it's about, we're still here talking about it 44 odd years later. I don't care what it's about. I don't care if I agree with it or I disagree with it. It's a great song. And it's charming. It's very intelligent. It's very clever. actually. The musicianship on it is great. I hear some influence on this track by Alex, from Alex, by Steve Hackett. I can hear a little Steve Hackett influence on Alex's playing on this song. That's a good thing. Incredible song. All these songs are first rate. For me, this is the first of their 3 masterpieces. This record, Hemispheres, is a 10 out of 10. My favorite 70s Rush record. Their most cohesive 70s record also. And the first of the 3 masterpieces, a definite 10 out of 10.
Can't fault your choice on any of these. Mine are all real similar, obviously with only 6 albums to choose from. But I was just thinking while you were talking about you don't hear many covers of Rush songs unless it's, Dream Theater or Primus, doing Rush covers. But there is a great cover of La Villa Strangiato by Steve Morris.
Okay.
That if you get a chance to check it out, he does a really good job with it. Of course, I'm a huge Steve Morris fan, and he's a huge Alex fan, and everything else. So, but yeah, check that out if you get a chance. So, my number one, of course, the only one left. Early 1978. My dad came home one night, and he's worked for Coca-Cola, and he said, "Hey, I'm working a concert at St. John Arena tonight. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll go." Who is the concert? He said, "Some band named Rush." I'm like, I don't know who they are, because I was 10 years old at the time, didn't know who Rush was, but I'm like, yeah, I'll go. And I saw the suite opened up for him, Ballroom Blitz and Love Is Like Oxygen. And
I love it. Love Is Like Oxygen is a great song. It's a great song.
It's
a great song.
I really took more to my 10-year-old self took more to Sweet than it did to Rush at the time. It was a little above my head at 10. I didn't understand it, and this guy was up there singing, and he was just screaming at the top of his lungs. I couldn't figure that out. Didn't know what he was saying on anything. And then several years later, I'm listening to the radio, and QFM 96 in Columbus, the classic rock station, and they're like, coming up, we have Xanadu, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Olivia Newton-John, may she rest in peace. I like,
yes, incredible. That's incredible voice.
That's what they were going to play on QFM 96, and this is like sacrilege, and they're like, by Rush, you probably had requested it at that time. And so I listened to it, and I'm like, this is a really good song. And much like you, it's become my favorite Rush song ever since is Xanadu. I also like Farewell to Kings, Madrigal, Cygnus X1, Book 1, of course, just an incredible song.
Their spaciest song for sure.
Yep, that's for sure. And you don't like Closer to the Heart. I do like Closer to the Heart. I would like to get the 40th anniversary edition on disc. There's some, bonus material on there, some live versions and stuff that's one I definitely need to pick up. I don't have that one, but that's my number one, A Farewell to Kings from 1977. So not too different on our picks today.
A quick thing, you mentioned Xanadu, and it was my favorite Rush song probably when I was in high school. And I almost did equate it with Olivia Newton-John because of the famous Olivia Newton-John song Xanadu, which I believe ELO backed her on that,
right.
on the movie. And may she rest in peace, by the way. She had, this is about Rush, but I just wanted to credit Olivia Newton-John. I've always thought very highly of her voice, and that was it was a very sad loss for the music world. And she's a great person too. And I always thought it would be great if there was some kind of a mashup with. I always wish they would have performed Xanadu together, the Rush version with her singing. I always thought it would have been the greatest thing ever to hear Olivia Newton-John singing Geddy Lee's vocal parts. I think it really would have worked actually. So rest in peace, Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah, and who didn't have a picture of Olivia Newton-John on their wall?
Did you ever see Gas Food Lodging? Oh, that's the movie Gas Food Lodging.
Yeah.
One of the characters just had a major infatuation with her in the movie. I remember this is 1992 indie movie, but anyway, rest in peace, Olivia.
and we have lost some great ones, here of late. Of course, Olivia Newton-John. His name escapes me, but the singer for Grim Reaper just passed here not too long ago. And the jazz world lost a great this week at 52 years old, Joey DeFrancesco, who kind of brought the Hammond B3 back into jazz music. Just a great performer, gone too soon. So rest in peace, to all those folks. Certainly, definitely had an impact on all of our lives musically. Stay tuned next week, folks. I got a big one. Not the greatest year in music. From what I'm seeing, I did a little research today, and it's certainly going to be tough to find 5 albums that I like, I think.
I know my 5, and I don't think it's a very strong year. My number 1 is going to just run away with it. I mean, run away with it.
Yeah.
This year. So there were some favorites from the year, but objectively speaking, the number 1 is just too easy to pick. But I don't think it's a very strong year, but it will be interesting to hear what our top 5s are, along with our special guests.
We're going to pick our 5 favorite albums from 1987, albums turning 35 this year. And we're going to have our special guest, our friend from up in the northern part of Ohio here, Dr. Kelly, will be joining us. He's assured me that the Browns game will be over in plenty of time for him to join us next week at about 8:30 Eastern. So look forward to having you back with us next week. Make sure you like and subscribe, comment on our channel. We appreciate you tuning in and watching these. And we'll see you in 2 weeks on September 11th.
Thanks for watching, folks, and please like and subscribe.